8 last time. So chapter 22, section 8 says that the Sabbath is kept holy to the Lord when people have first prepared their hearts appropriately and arranged their everyday affairs in advance. Then they observe a holy rest all day from their own works, words, and thoughts about their secular employment and recreation. Not only that, but they also fill the whole time with public and private acts of worship and the duties of necessity and mercy. So we had good discussion on that, gave a bit of historical background about King James and then King Charles publishing their book of sports and essentially binding the conscience of the Puritan and nonconformist ministers to read that. But the big takeaway idea here is that we should not have distractions on the Lord's Day worship, but we need to be planning it ahead, planning our activities so that they're done during the week, so that the Lord's Day is truly the Lord's day and not the Lord's 45 minutes or the Lord's hour and a half or whatever the case may be. That we devote ourselves to treating this day as set apart and obviously corporate worship, but then also other things that we can do during the day to show hospitality and to do acts of mercy with others. And a few questions and comments came to me during the week, which I've put down in pencil here so I don't forget, so we'll cover that. But I want to read this text from Matthew first to kind of move everything into place, and then we can pick that up. So we completed up to the end of note 30 there last week. So we're going to look at Matthew 12, 1 to 13 this morning. And who wants to read that? Who's willing to read Matthew 12, 1 through 13? Do we have a volunteer? Brooklyn has volunteered. All right.
At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." And he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." He went on from there and entered their synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" so that they might accuse him. He said to them, "Which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Of how much more value is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath." Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And the man stretched it out, and it was restored, healthy like the other.
Okay, thanks, Brooklyn. Okay, so there you have a picture, clearly. Jesus is doing good works on the Sabbath, which at this time was still on Saturday, on the seventh day. And that is in support of this last sentence here in the confession, which says, "Not only that, but they also fill the whole time with public and private acts of worship and the duties of necessity and mercy." And that was one of the questions or comments that came after last week's discussion is, two things, I guess. One is, what about commercial recreation? So, okay, it's fine if I mentioned Kelvin played lawn bowling in his backyard on the Sabbath, and so he did not take like a super strict view that some of the English did. But what about if this involves commerce on the Lord's Day? And I would say for myself, again, I mentioned it last week, despite the fact that even in my Mennonite upbringing, when we did not do extra work on Sunday, we did works of necessity. The cows got milked, the calves got fed. That is truly works of necessity. You can't avoid that. So that's perfectly fine. And yet it wasn't uncommon to go to restaurants and stuff like that. I have gotten to the point personally where I have seen that's contradictory. And I mentioned last week, I don't want the girls in this church to miss church and rush out of church because they're expected to serve the lunch crowd on Sunday. So why would I support that? I'm not going to support it because I don't want our girls to have to leave. So why would I pay to have somebody else's girls miss church and rush out of church and so forth? And then the argument always could be, well, yeah, but it's open anyway. These businesses are open anyway, so nothing really changes. Well, you could make that argument too. Us pulling our kids out of public school, unfortunately, did not bring the whole system collapsing. I would love it if it would have, but it didn't. Public schools still exist, and we were not interested in sending our kids there anymore. So just because something exists doesn't mean that that's warrant necessarily that we have to participate in that. So I would leave that for food for thought. But one that came to me from someone who has been on a big kick against farmers lately. His initials are Rob H. Oh, that's too easy. R. Harder. Maybe that's easier to hide. He brought up, okay, so I'm here. My cows all got milk this morning, and I want to stay after church to do baptism classes. And during that time, the cows need to get milked again. I am paying somebody to do my work for me that I could do today, and that is true. How does that honor the Sabbath principle? And again, I would say that just simply falls under the works of necessity, right? Nurses have to be at the hospital. Police officers and firefighters have to be on call because house fires don't wait until Monday morning. Okay, there are certain legitimate works of necessity. If Howard gets a call that someone's furnace isn't working on Sunday and it's minus 35 outside, he's not going to say, at least if I'm the customer, I hope he's not going to say, well, it can wait for Monday, right? There are works of necessity. The Bible's not unrealistic. The world is still turning, okay? Do I absolutely have to go to a restaurant? No, I don't. Do I absolutely have to do this, that, or the other thing? No. Do my cows absolutely have to get milked? Yes, they do, okay? And someone's open heart surgery absolutely has to happen right now. And Jesus honored that here. They take bread. They're gleaning on the Sabbath. So this isn't unrealistic. And again, the principle here, the heart behind this is that we were not made for the Sabbath, right? So it's not like the God put the Sabbath in place and then oriented us to be slaves to that, but rather it is good for us and it points us to what it even says here. Jesus says something greater than the temple is here. It's meant to point us to the ultimate Sabbath rest, which is eternity. And so when we go through that 6-in-1 cycle of starting with a day of rest and then going out and working from that rest, what we are doing is rehearsing the way the universe actually works. That's the way reality is. God himself created the world that way. We are conforming ourselves to the reality of the universe when we internalize this pattern, and we are preparing ourselves for eternity. Because I don't believe that the 6-in-1 pattern is over into eternity, right? Any more than this globe goes away into eternity. Things are fixed. Heaven and earth are remarried in eternity. We will have work to do in the new creation, and we will have an eternal monument that Christ is our final Sabbath rest, because then our work will be done without thorns and thistles and setbacks and so forth. So, I think the big takeaway here for all of us is to be intentional about making sure that our Sundays don't get crowded, right? The elites don't want you to know this, but you can do your grocery shopping on Thursday. It's allowed. You can just walk in there and buy your groceries, okay? You can plan ahead. It works. And I'd say it's good so that we're not filling up our Sundays with busyness and losing sight of the fact that we actually need this. This is good for us. It orients our days. And it's a reminder of the way God actually made the world to work. So I'll I'll leave that. I'll leave that there. Discussion, further discussion on this. Lisa.
Maybe I'm going to stir the pot a bit, but growing up, even watching sports on TV would have been considered making somebody work, or making a phone call was making somebody work. So at what point does it become legalism, and what point does it become honoring the Sabbath?
Okay, I would say on stuff like that, and I think there are certain things which are clearly out and some things which are clearly in. That much is clear. But once people take a checklist approach, I'd say you're already in danger of legalism because you've lost the point. Okay? The answer I got when I was actually asking a gentleman who's devoted his life to studying Puritan confessions, if I needed to take an exception to the 1689 on the point about leisure, because I honestly don't have a problem. If we have like here in the boys' wall and we go play soccer outside, I have zero issue with that, none whatsoever. Do I need to take an exception to the 1689? His answer was no, and the way he summarized it, I thought was quite helpful, is as you think through your day, are the things you are doing intentionally serving restfulness for you or intentionally serving busyness? And that's the question. I do know some Sabbatarians who are far busier on Sunday than I am, like strict Sabbatarians, because they're busy checking everybody else and monitoring their behavior. Right? It's like the woman whose head covering is this big, and she barks at her husband, "Lead me!" Right? Well, you've missed the point, lady. Okay? And that doesn't devoid the principle of those things, but it just says there is a way to lose the plot. Right? Legalism has lost the plot. But that's right. So if your conscience would say, you know what, this is close enough to something I'm uncomfortable with, I'm not participating, good, then don't do that. But it's very hard to make an exact checklist. Okay, was Calvin breaking the Lord's Day when he's lawn bowling with the kids? Well, he obviously didn't think so. I don't think so. Maybe for the next person that is a drudgery and a work, and they shouldn't because they'd hate every minute of it, but they know they should do it to be nice with their kids. Well, we have to leave adequate room here to say there's actual heart issues with all these things, right? So I'd want to stop short of, because I've heard that too, well, if you send a text message on Sunday, someone at the phone company's working, and like at some point it switches to, no, it turns out that we were made for the Sabbath after all, and it's a slave master rather than a day of rest. So I thought the advice was good. Everything we do should intentionally serve our restfulness and our peace for that day. Right? Some things I think are clearly out. Some things, like Lord's Day worship, are mandatory. Like it's not optional whether we're going to church, provided you're not sick or whatever, right? And then within that, like a lot of things in the Christian life, there's gray areas with liberty, and we have to not get on each other's case, I would say. And if you don't want to send text messages on Sunday, there's nothing that says you have to. Then don't. There's lots of things I don't do on Sunday that you might find restful, and vice versa. That's fine.
Does it help to remember to keep the 10 Commandments on a level? Not to set, the Sabbath one is a very easy one to become legalistic on, or am I not thinking correctly?
No, I think you're right. But I think this one's tricky because this is the one that people are the most nitpicky on in some circles, but also the only one that Christians have also made optional. This is a funny thing because.
But that's my point. It's more of a reflection of your heart than which commandment you're making great kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. And this one is tricky. And I think because so many Christians have made the fourth commandment optional, people react strongly and that's human behavior. But let's say the 10th commandment about coveting, or the 7th about adultery. Okay, well, we know adultery starts in the heart. If you're a man, you notice that some women are attractive and they go to the Steinbach swimming pool, so I can never go to the Steinbach swimming pool. Right? Like, well, maybe you can, just control your thoughts. Right? So I would just want to treat it the same as the others. The principle is not optional. The principle is the principle. It's not optional. There's not 9 commandments today. There remains 10. And use wisdom is I think the way I'd want to handle it. And I push back. I tend to push more one way on this one because my guess is 85% of evangelicals just think this is entirely optional. And I do not share that view, not at all. But more on this.
And to ease the conscience on a phone company example, if that is someone's thoughts on it, like, well, you're making something work. Those phone companies have to stay afloat going for emergency services, for emergencies between people. The workload does not actually increase.
Right.
As far as I can tell,
Because they're doing, yeah.
it's already available to make sure that communication can stay open.
Right. And I'd be, I know what you're saying. Keith is just saying with the phone companies and stuff, because they have to be open for emergencies anyway. I'm not sure how far I'd go with that argument.
Well, because electrical companies have to, hydro has to stay open. Does that mean
Yeah.
only use electrical appliances that are necessary?
Right. And some very strict people, so Jews to this day have Sabbath setting on their stove so that the stove lights up on its own Friday night. So you don't, because Judaism is a religion of lawyers, right? So Jews are wonderful at breaking every single law in the Bible with meticulous law keeping, right? In Florida, there's a huge Jewish community, and they have elevator attendants because Jews aren't allowed to press buttons in the elevator because that's work. So people, scum like you, can do it for them, right? Well, like at a certain point, this is a game. At a certain point, legalism says none of us actually take this seriously. We're just finding workarounds. Again, that doesn't violate the principle. The only reason I wouldn't go too far with that is because you can say, well, Costco's open. I'm not making anyone work anyway, so I'll just do my grocery shopping Sunday. So I personally probably wouldn't use that argument at least I wouldn't push it very far. Not that it's wrong, someone's going to push you on consistency on that one. And I'm all about being consistent, or at least trying my best to be consistent, imperfectly. More. Who hurt you, Rob? Show me on the doll where the farmers hurt you. Right. Okay, so you're...
If you have 1,500 cows and you need 10 employees to maintain that, well, I understand. But when you have 10 cows and you don't need an employee to maintain that on the Sunday, but you bring one in anyways, how is that different?
Right. So Rob's just saying, okay, so on a huge farm, the farmer can't do everything himself. On our size of farm, milking 65 cows, I can do everything by myself, right? So whether I do it myself or whether I pay someone to do it, there is a certain amount of work that has to happen every day.
That's the same thing with me, whether I cook them food in my kitchen or I go to a restaurant.
Right. There, I would say it's not the same argument. That's a different argument because going to a restaurant is not a work of necessity. Eggs have to get picked, but eating is. Yeah, but there's no need for it to be. That's correct. Yep. Right. Okay, so Rob's equating if someone pays someone to do works of necessity, that's not different than paying someone to make your food for you on the Sabbath. I would say I get the argument. I'd push back on two ways. One is if I'm paying someone to do chores at our place, I've intentionally made my chore times that it never interferes with church because I'm not paying someone else to miss church. My conscience would not let me do that. And the girls that are waiting for us at Smitty's are getting paid to not be at church. Whether they go or not is a separate issue. But there's an incentive for them to not be in church. And I don't think that's right. And we did survive for many hundreds of years with things being closed on Sunday, and nobody died of starvation in those centuries. So, yeah. Right. And so, yeah, and I get what you're saying. I'm pushing back against probably about 4 decades now of secularization on this matter that has borne bad fruit. And it has borne bad fruit. If, would I go back and slap my grandparents' hands for going for lunch after church? No, I wouldn't. But I've said that's inconsistent. I'm not going to do it the same way. Because there's an inconsistency in there in my mind that I'm saying I want to opt out of that. And again, when I talk to other guys that have done nothing but study this, the one guy actually said, you know what, I never thought either, ever, about going to restaurants after church, but consistency has forced me. He said, we're weaning ourselves off of that. He said, I probably haven't done it in 2 or 3 years. But prior to that, he never thought about it because we're all a product of the time we live in. And if that seems normal to us, it just seems normal. But again, I'd say even if we eat normally at our house, it's not like Tanya's typically in the kitchen like she would be another day. Right? You prepare the night before. Something's in the slow cooker. We get home, it's ready to go. But, oh, yeah. And with that, I 100% agree. Yes, I agree. On that point, I totally agree. So the question still should remain, is this something that's necessary or can it be done on Monday? Yep. 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 Right. Yeah. Well, there's a difference if my overhead door is broken and the barn is going to freeze because it's minus 40 and all the water's going to freeze. That's different than saying, oh, my remote's not working. I have to use the chain to open my door. Rob, it's an emergency. Get here. I hope you're going to tell me you can use the chain. You'll still come? Okay, good. Okay. But on that front, I would totally agree with what you're saying there. So even if it's paid labor, for me, I'm not, and again, I want to leave room and be gracious here. If you're asking me, I'm not paying anybody to clean calf pens on Sunday because it can wait. And I'm not paying the silage crew to come chop corn on Sunday because we can do it tomorrow. But
Growing up with my dad, we grew up on a farm, and the bare minimum was done. You did all your prep work, you fed all the cows, you did all that. Right? We wouldn't bring in hired help on a Sunday. We took
Right.
During the week, if we wanted a day off, then somebody might permit. But that's how I was raised. It's just, in my mind, picking on the farmers.
Well, yeah, and I would expect you would pick on the farmers. Because now why not, Pauline? Okay, so you're talking about the land Sabbath and some of the Jubilee laws. Okay, so again, it actually probably matters who you talk to. Typically, that has been understood. Those things have been understood as ceremonial laws, and there's actually lots of ceremonial laws attached to the Sabbath, right? So the Sabbath principle, the 6-1 principle, is in the Ten Commandments, but then you go outside of the Ten Commandments, and there's a whole bunch of ceremonies that were unique to Israel. Like, don't pick up sticks, don't do this, don't do that, that clearly have expired because they're ceremonial laws. It's not a moral principle, it's a ceremonial Israelite kind of application of how this works, and we've all agreed. Christians have historically agreed the ceremonial law expires. There's no more food laws, there's no more, the ceremonial aspect of it is gone. So that hasn't typically been practiced. However, some people would argue that we should still be doing those things because there's a creational good there as well, giving the land rest. Summer fallow used to be a thing. Nobody that I know today pays $10,000 an acre for land and then summer follows it. I've not seen it, but it used to be. My grandpa never summer followed either, but he talked about his grandpa used to summer follow land, right? And they felt it was better for weed control. Then you can spread manure all summer, and that giving the land a rest was better for it. So I don't think that was based on a biblical principle. That was just based on this seems to work better. There's a creational kind of principle in there. So if somebody did that, I wouldn't push back on that at all. But yeah, more here. I think you answered your own question. Don't nitpick. So Jesse's asking, okay, how do you honor a principle without nitpicking on other Christians? And I'd say the answer's in the question. I'm going to say how I understand this. I'm going to try to explain as best I can how Christians have historically understood this. I'm going to encourage that. I think that's best. And then we also understand that Romans 14 is also in the Bible, and we don't have to get on everyone's case over every point of difference either. You state your case. If it's blatant sin, I mean, if someone says, yeah, you know what, I went to church in January, I'm good till March, well, I think you've got some Christian liberty there to say, brother, that's not okay. If the exact way that they treat Sunday is a bit different than you, let it slide. It's not worth picking a fight over every. Proverb says, don't grab every passing dog by the ears, right? Don't get yourself involved in a quarrel not your own. So state your case. Okay, Romans 14 is in the Bible, and we drive on. That's the way I'd want to encourage people to treat it.
I'm just curious if you would know what the Roman Catholic view on the Sabbath is. Just like,
Okay. The Roman Catholic view on the Sabbath is essentially my own view. Historically, again, and this should help us reckon with the freakishness of our own age. There's no branch of Christianity that historically disagrees with this. The Catholics would have been a bit more like the Continental Reformed, where leisure activities weren't a big deal. whereas some of the English-speaking world was more strict on some of that stuff. But historically, what's outlined here in the Reformed confessions wouldn't be essentially different than the Roman Catholic position. Because Roman Catholics outlawed commerce on Sunday as well. That was just kind of the bare minimum of Christianity at one point in time. And on leisure stuff, essentially took a continental view. But historically, this hasn't been, and I'll leave that with you to do with what you want. Historically, this is not a controversial issue. In my lifetime, it's a very controversial issue. Do with that what you want. Tyson.
Is it maybe a better approach, just as long as you're kind of wrestling with it periodically, not trying to create anything, super black and white, super, legalistic. But when something comes up, you go, okay, let's think about it. Someone wants to do something on Sunday, okay, let's wrestle with it for a bit, rather than taking a checklist approach. I mean, there's things where you can go, sorry, that's on the list. We don't need to do regular work on a Sunday. That might be checklistable. But
I think that's a good approach. I think Tyson's asking, is it healthy to kind of wrestle with things as they come up and as we consider them? I think that's just the Christian life. We should always be examining all of our practices and say, does this bring glory to God? Do I have freedom here? Do I not have freedom here? What does Christian freedom look like here? How do I relate to brothers and sisters who are sincere Christians who do things differently than me? Those are always good questions. I think what we have to be careful of on all questions, Josh brought this up yesterday in one of the sessions, it's common on pick your doctrine. Pick your doctrine. Doesn't matter. I've never studied this before, but I'm used to doing it a certain way, so obviously my current practice is correct. Now I'm going to take the text and I'm going to do origami to arrive at the position that I've already decided before any honest study. I've already decided what I'm used to is correct. And then I'll get quite creative sometimes doing my work to arrive at that position. That's not honest. And I'd say there we have to just be honest on anything. Go where the Bible leads, and it is possible that what you're used to is wrong. And if the Bible moves us to change our thinking or to change our practice, we have to go there. But it's never a good idea to say, here's what I'm accustomed to. Come hell or high water, the Bible will arrive at that position once I'm done studying it. Yeah. So I just think we all need to be careful of that. What you've grown up with is not necessarily correct. Be willing to re-examine and then be gracious with other brothers and sisters as they're working through it. But we should never do interpretation that is interested primarily in preserving what we're used to. And then pick that's across the board. That whether you're studying Calvinism, whether you're studying eschatology, whether you're studying church government, whether you're studying Sabbath, that's just I think that's an important thing you brought up. There's Lisa and then Rob. Yeah.
Where you are not a question to the bed in Holland, if you do take a card from church, you're kind of looked at. But yet the Sabbath rest of just walking to church as a whole group.
Well, there's a great example. One culture walks to church, one culture bikes to church, one culture drives to church. No matter what you do, you're going to get hung. Because you got to get to church somehow, right? And so we also have to be careful, as part of Tyson's point, I think, to also have the honesty to say what's a culturally applied, and different cultures, different Christian cultures that are legitimately Christian pick up different forms of applying biblical principles. And that doesn't make one right or one wrong. Okay? A church service looked different in Presbyterian Scotland than in Lutheran Germany. And they have the exact same gospel, and they're trying their best using familiar forms and things that, okay, that's fine. I expect church to look different in Scotland than Germany and Finland and Uganda. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The principles remain, but then there's culturally applied ways of making it work in what we're used to, our customs, our manner of dress, our manner of singing, and it just,
Jesse's point, we're not going to go to Holland to prove a point that you can't drive a car to church. Like,
no, that's obnoxious.
exactly.
Yeah. Christian liberty is real, but no one has the Christian liberty to be obnoxious about their Christian liberty. That's immature and it's selfish and it's just unhelpful. Yep. Yep. I would agree with that, Rob.
Different times, and we have to allow that process to happen. And that's where Sunday school class like this or whatever discussion and you learn, and when you meet their examples, things change. You start seeing things differently, but you have to allow that process to happen for each person at the level they're at. We're all at different levels of sanctification.
Yep.
And that's what we have to keep in mind.
I agree. And sometimes the surest way to make, and I have to be careful with this myself. I have to watch myself on this a fair bit. One of the surest ways to make sure that nobody will ever see it your way is to be like super obnoxious in their face. And just watch that. That's just human behavior. The pushier and more in your face you are on something, you are guaranteeing that person will never see it your way. Okay? Because the position's not the obstacle, you are. Right? And so to Lisa's point, to go be obnoxious and go prove your Christian liberty to someone, it's immature. Okay? I have Christian liberty. I don't mind doing certain things, and if I know someone struggles with it, it would just be obnoxious and immature of me to do it in front of them if I know that's a struggle for them. Like, I don't need to do this right now. I can do it another time. Like, there's no point in provoking people. State your case, live the way you understand it, and then trust that the Holy Spirit will work in other people and His timing and His way. And Yep. No, I think that's good. So Rob just mentioned visiting Old Order Mennonites in South America, practices that we would consider highly legalistic and very arbitrary, right? Like rubber tires are sinful, steel wheels are obviously godly, right? We would see that, and I think rightly, as legalism. But you won't win them to your side by going there and getting in their face or being obnoxious or mocking them, right? Wait for a natural opportunity to discuss, this is interesting. How did you arrive at that position? Explain this to me. How is it explained to you? Does the Bible speak to this issue? That's how you might gain some traction, right? mocking or getting in someone's face or being obnoxious or cagey, it's not, that's not the way. And I think on Sabbath stuff, again, not because the principles changed, but because our cultural practice that we have all grown up with is so out of sorts with history, we have to leave some grace to say, how would people know better? Like, how? And then we leave some room to say, well, let's work on this together and challenge each other and not be obnoxious with each other, and show some grace as we have those discussions. As long as we can abuse farmers, everything is good. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, Inga, and then Dave.
On that note, I'm inviting you for lunch, but then you have to help me feed cats.
Yeah. I want to see Rob feed calves. I can imagine how much patience there is for the calf that won't drink. Calf might be seeing the black lights pretty quick. Yeah. Dave.
Yeah, I think for like to look at it from when we have cultural issues that arise, not to judge others, but to come to your own conviction on it. I think what's been helpful for me is to look back at church orthodoxy, find out why they believe, like go back to the biblical references that they used, not because they were legalistic, but they did actually have a reason why they did what they did. Then compare it to why I have a different view of it today, and can I justify it as well as they justify their orthodoxy, right? And so, like, I mean, we've talked about it before, like we believe is baptism, which isn't always completely orthodox in church history. I believe, which is why I hold to it, that I can defend that vigorously from the Bible, even after reading passages of those who believe in that. On some of the other stuff, I find it a little harder because I look at it and I go, well, that's actually a valid point, and I don't know if I can make my point as well as they make theirs. Now, this isn't so now that's not to use and go and bash somebody else over the head. That's to change my viewpoints, not others. Others have to get their conscience and work it through themselves. At least that's what I found myself.
Yeah, so Dave is just, if I can summarize it correctly, Dave is just pointing out, looking at history is very helpful. Look at how Christians of the past have made their case. If you can make a better one, then make it, using Scripture. But if you can't, just saying, oh, well, I don't care, that's not... And don't strawman their case. Look at it, yep. Yep. And if you can make a better case, wonderful. If you can't, just saying, well, I don't care, that's what I'm saying. If that's not an argument, that's not a reason to overturn a historical practice. Not that historical practices can't be overturned, but there better be good, sound, biblical reasons to overturn something. And that's why, and this isn't a trick, but one of the reasons I appeal to history as often as I do is not because I'm getting slippery on sola scriptura, it's because exactly discussions like this. If you come to somebody and punch them in the face with a Bible verse, what you're communicating, if that's done the wrong way, what you're communicating is, I believe the Bible and you don't. You're probably not a Christian, you should be like me. Whereas history is a much gentler way into this, right? Because how have Christians understood this, right? Who's marching out of step, right? And it's a gentler way to introduce thoughts into people's heads that our own culture keeps us from. C.S. Lewis writes in the preface to his book on Athanasius, he says, one of the best ways to keep yourself from getting too infatuated with your own age is to read old books. Read dead guys. Not because dead guys didn't make mistakes. His point is, they made different mistakes in the 1200s than we're making today. And if you only read books from your own day, you're just going to be reinforced all the same mistakes that are assumed by contemporary authors. Right? Read old dead guys. We'll see their mistakes from our vantage point, but they're also going to point out our mistakes from their vantage point, and we need to be humble enough to be corrected. And to me, history is a gentle way to get people to think more broadly than just their little 60-year snippet of life that they got to see one tiny sliver of how reality works. Because 60 or 100 or even 200 years, frankly, is just far too short to say anything serious can be concluded from that. I don't think we can do that. So history is helpful on a lot of issues, I think. It's 10:16. Are we ready to bring this one in for a landing? Close it off. Any last comments? If not, then why don't we close in prayer and then we can have time of coffee and fellowship. Father God, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for giving us your word. Thank you for giving us access into saints who have gone before us. Lord, I pray that we would be gracious where Christians disagree, that we would be submissive where history, and most importantly, where your word speaks. I pray that we would be honest and willing to change our practice according to what you show us in your word, versus mistreating your word to just maintain familiarity. Lord, I pray that we would do that not just with this, but with all things, that we would be actual Bereans, and we would always be studying and wrestling honestly with your word and willing to go where it would take us. Lord, I pray for graciousness on this and on all matters where we don't bind one another's conscience, but we wrestle honestly, and then we show grace and Christian liberty on these things as well. Lord, I want to pray that you be with us now as we move into a time of fellowship. I pray that you would bless us as we talk and visit and laugh and share some warmth, and then also prepare our hearts for corporate worship, that you would feed us there through the preaching of your word, through prayer, through worship, through singing. Lord, that you would be glorified and we would be fed. Thank you for your kindness, and we pray this all in the strong name of Jesus. And amen.